Just 2 years earlier, Amara had been an ordinary Nigerian girl chasing big dreams in London. She worked long hours as a nurse, sending money home to her mother in Lagos. Life was simple: work, home, sleep, repeat, until she met Ethan, a quiet British architect with a disarming smile and eyes that carried both warmth and mystery. They met at a coffee shop one rainy evening. When she spilled hot tea on his sketchbook, he laughed instead of getting angry, and from that moment, something in both of them changed. Their friendship grew quickly. They shared stories about childhood, music, and dreams, hers filled with family love, his haunted by loneliness. Amara introduced him to Nigerian food: jollof rice, suya, and puff puff, while he taught her to love English breakfast and countryside walks. They came from different worlds, yet every conversation felt like they were made from the same heart. Before long, Ethan said the words she never expected to hear from a foreign man: "I think I'm falling for you." One evening, under a Lagos sunset glowing gold, Michael promised her, "Next month, I'll fly to London. No more screens between us." Emma believed him. She even told her mother, who smiled softly but said, "Love across oceans is like a candle in the wind. Protect it carefully." Emma laughed then, but those words would haunt her later. Ethan received a sudden call. He told her he had to travel just a few weeks, he promised. But weeks turned into months, and his messages grew shorter. Then one day, he stopped replying entirely. No calls, no explanations, no goodbye. Amara was shattered. The man who once said forever had vanished without a trace. Time passed, and Amara forced herself to move on. She met Tund, a kind-hearted Nigerian businessman living in London. He was everything Ethan wasn't: stable, present, reliable. After a year of dating, he proposed. Her friends cheered. Her mother cried with joy. Amara smiled too, but deep down, a part of her heart still whispered Ethan's name. And now, here she was standing in her wedding gown, surrounded by laughter and champagne when the lights went out. Her heart raced as the voice echoed through the darkness. "He's not who you think he is." The lights came back on, and there he was. Ethan, wet from the rain, breathless, staring straight into her eyes like a ghost from a past she thought was buried forever. The hall fell completely silent. You could hear the rain hammering against the windows as guests turned in confusion. Amara's heart pounded so loudly she could barely breathe. Tund, her groom, stood frozen beside her, his expression darkening as he stared at the stranger in the doorway. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice rising above the whispers. Ethan stepped forward, his clothes soaked, his voice breaking. "Amara, I had to come. I couldn't let you marry him without knowing the truth." The crowd gasped, and Amara's bouquet slipped from her trembling hands. "Stop, Ethan." But he shook his head, refusing to move until he spoke. "I'm sorry for ruining your day," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "But you deserve to know why I disappeared." Tund clenched his jaw. "You've said enough. Leave." But Amara raised her hand weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, let him talk." Every camera in the room turned toward them: a bride, a groom, and a man from her past standing under one roof, with love and chaos tearing the air apart. Ethan took a shaky breath. "The day I left London, I didn't go on a business trip. I was running." The crowd murmured. "Running from who?" Amara asked softly. "From the truth," he said, his voice trembling. "My family. They never wanted us together. My father threatened to destroy everything: my company, my career, my name, if I didn't end things with you. So I left to protect you." Amara stared at him, her mind spinning. "All this time," she whispered, "you disappeared because of them." Patience snapped. "Enough of this nonsense," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You come here, on my wedding day, with your cheap lies and wet clothes, just to make a scene." But Ethan didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Amara. "I'm not here to fight," he said calmly. "I just need her to know I never stopped loving her." The words hit her like lightning, the same words he once whispered in the quiet of a London night. Her knees weakened, and she felt the ground sway beneath her. The hall erupted into chaos, guests shouting, cameras flashing, whispers spreading like wildfire. Amara stood frozen between two men, one from her past, one from her present. Her mother rushed forward, pleading, Amara, don't listen to him. You have a good man now. But Amara's eyes were on Ethan, searching for the truth in his trembling lips and tear-filled eyes. She remembered every night they spent dreaming about a life together, and every morning she woke up alone. Her voice cracked. Why now, Ethan? Why today? He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. Because if I waited one more day, you'd be gone forever. Tund turned toward her, his voice shaking with anger and desperation. Amara, tell him to leave. Tell him you don't love him anymore. The hall went quiet again, every eye waiting for her answer. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Ethan took a step closer. Amara, please, look me in the eye and say it. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stared at the man who once owned her heart. She whispered, and then her voice broke completely. The room spun, her vision blurred, and before she could finish the sentence, she fainted. When Amara opened her eyes, the bright white ceiling of a hospital room greeted her. Her head throbbed, her body weak. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was until the echo of Ethan's voice returned to her mind. She turned her head and saw two figures standing by the window, Tund and Ethan, both silent, both waiting. The tension in the room was so thick it could choke the air. Her mother sat beside her bed, whispering prayers under her breath, tears staining her cheeks. The doctor left quietly, leaving only the three of them. Tund stepped forward first, his face calm but his voice sharp. You fainted during the wedding. They said it was stress, he said softly. But let's be honest, Amara, it's not stress. It's him. He pointed at Ethan, who stood silently near the curtain, drenched from the rain, his eyes red with exhaustion. I'm not here to fight, Ethan said gently. I just want her to know the truth. Amara looked between them, one man offering peace, the other offering truth. After I left, Ethan began, I tried to reach you, but my father shut everything down, my bank accounts, my phone lines, even my passport. He paused, looking away. I was stuck in Cape Town, working odd jobs, trying to rebuild. When I finally returned to London, you were gone. Everyone said you'd moved on. His voice broke. I thought I'd lost you forever. But then I saw your wedding post online, and I knew I had to come. Amara's breath caught in her throat. That was the truth she'd waited years to hear, yet it hurt more than silence. Tund clenched his fists, his patience snapping. So, what now? He said bitterly. You expect her to leave everything behind for a man who ran away? Ethan turned toward him, calm but firm. I didn't run away. I was forced to. Then, quietly, he looked back at Amara. Do you still love me? He asked. The room went still. Even the heart monitor beside her seemed to pause. Amara looked at the ring on her finger, Tund's ring, and then at Ethan's trembling hands. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know anymore, she whispered. Her mother stood and spoke softly. Amara, love is not a war. Sometimes peace is better than passion. But Amara barely heard her. She was staring at Ethan, at the man who once made her believe in forever. Ethan took a step closer, but Tund blocked him. Don't make this harder, Tund warned. Ethan nodded slowly, his voice breaking. I won't. I just needed to see her one last time. He turned toward the door, pausing for a moment before saying quietly, I'll always love you, Amara, even if I'm no longer the one standing beside you. As Ethan walked out, the sound of the door closing echoed through the room like thunder. Amara covered her face, sobbing quietly. Tund sat beside her, unsure whether to hold her or give her space. Outside, the rain poured harder, as if the sky itself was mourning. She whispered under her breath, if only love and timing spoke the same language. And as the night fell over the hospital, Amara knew her heart was still caught between two worlds, and one of them had just walked away. Days passed, but the silence between Amara and Tund grew heavier than words could carry. They returned home, yet nothing felt like home anymore. Every glance, every touch, felt forced, like two strangers trying to remember how to be in love. Tund would leave early for work and come home late, avoiding her eyes, and every night, Amara would scroll through old photos of Ethan, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stop herself. She didn't miss the man he was, but the version of herself she became when she was with him, fearless, free, alive. One morning, while cleaning her drawer, she found a small envelope tucked between her old journals. It had her name written in Ethan's handwriting. Her heart raced. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a short note that read, "If love still lingers in your heart, meet me at the place where the ocean first saw us. E." Her eyes widened. That place was the small beach in Lagos where they first met 3 years ago, when Ethan was volunteering for a charity project. The letter wasn't dated. Had he left it recently, or years ago? That night, Amara couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain outside reminded her of that hospital night, of Ethan's voice fading through the door. She turned to look at Tund, peacefully asleep beside her. He had given her stability, care, and a life many would dream of. But her heart, somehow, still beat to the rhythm of a memory she couldn't silence. Was it wrong to still wonder what could have been? Or was it human to crave closure from a love that never truly ended? The following weekend, Amara packed a small bag. She told Tund she needed time to think, to breathe, to find peace. He didn't stop her. He simply nodded, his eyes heavy with understanding. She flew to Lagos that same night. When the plane landed, the humid air hit her face, carrying a wave of memories. She took a cab to the coastline where she and Ethan had once walked barefoot on the sand, laughing at the world like two souls who owned nothing but each other. The beach was quiet now. Only the waves spoke, whispering secrets the world had long forgotten. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she saw a familiar figure standing by the water. Her breath caught in her. His back was to her, his hair slightly longer, his shirt soaked from the sea breeze. She took a step forward, her heart pounding like a drum. "Ethan," she whispered. He turned slowly, and when their eyes met, time stood still. But something was different. His smile was soft, yet sad, as if he knew this meeting wasn't just about love, but about something far deeper. Something she wasn't ready to hear. Ethan's eyes carried a heaviness Amara had never seen before. When he spoke, his voice trembled slightly, the ocean breeze catching every word. "Amara," he began softly, "there's something I never told you. Something I didn't even know how to say back then." She stepped closer, her heart racing. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked. He took a deep breath, staring at the waves as if they could give him courage. "The reason I disappeared, it wasn't just my father's doing, it was because of my mother. She was dying." His voice cracking. "She had a heart condition. I found out a week before I proposed to you. I flew back to London to see her, and by the time I got there, it was too late." He turned away, tears glistening under the sunset. "My father made me promise not to come back to Africa. He said I needed to take over the family business, that love could wait." He gave a bitter laugh. "But love doesn't wait, does it? It either fades, or it burns everything in its path." Amara's heart ached as she listened. For the first time, she saw the boy she loved broken, human, and haunted by choices that weren't his. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. It was cold, trembling slightly. For a moment, time folded back on itself, the years apart, the tears, the silence, everything melted into that single touch. "I would have gone with you," she whispered. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I couldn't ask you to." The honesty in his eyes made her chest tighten. He wasn't perfect, neither was she, but somewhere between their broken promises, love had found a way to survive, even if only as a ghost. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph, worn at the edges. It was a picture of Amara, the one he took at the beach years ago, when she laughed at the waves and said, "The ocean remembers love stories." "I kept this with me through everything," he said. "It reminded me of what it felt like to be alive." Amara smiled faintly, tears sliding down her cheeks. But as she reached to take the photo, her eyes caught something strange, a hospital tag tucked behind it, with Ethan's name on it. Her smile faded. "Ethan, what is this?" she asked softly. Ethan froze. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he closed his hand around the photo and looked away. "There's one more thing I need to tell you," he murmured. The waves crashed harder now, the wind growing colder. "I didn't just come back to see you, Amara. I came back because I'm sick." Her heart stopped, her lips trembled. What do you mean, sick? Ethan turned back toward her, tears falling freely now. I have the same condition my mother had. The doctors say I don't have much time left. For a long moment, Amara couldn't speak. The sound of the waves, the wind, even her heartbeat, everything felt distant, unreal. She wanted to scream, to deny it, to tell him love wasn't supposed to end like this. But instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding him as if she could stop time itself. I waited for you once, she whispered. I won't lose you again. Ethan rested his head against hers. The sea roared louder, and somewhere within that chaos, their hearts found silence, a silence filled with both love and fear. Amara's eyes glistened with tears that refused to fall. The ocean breeze brushed through her hair as she held Ethan tighter, afraid that letting go might make him vanish again. He pulled back slightly, brushing his thumb against her cheek. I didn't tell you to make you pity me, he said softly. I told you because I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye this time. Amara shook her head, her voice trembling. Don't talk like that. We'll find a way. There are doctors, hospitals, treatments. He silenced her with a gentle smile. Sometimes love isn't about fighting time. It's about cherishing what's left of it. They stayed by the shore until the night came alive with fireflies dancing above the waves. It was the same spot where Ethan had once told her he loved her for the first time, and the same place she had promised forever. Now, forever felt shorter than ever. Amara rested her head on his shoulder. Do you ever wish we could go back? She whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. No, because if we went back, we'd never learn how much love can survive. The stars shimmered above them, quiet witnesses to a love that refused to die, even when time was running out. Later that night, they sat near a small fire Ethan had built from driftwood. He pulled out the same photograph again, this time handing it to her without hesitation. Keep it, he said. I don't need it anymore. I've already memorized every part of you. Amara looked at the picture, then at him, his smile weaker now, his eyes tired but peaceful. She tucked the photograph close to her heart. I'll keep it, she said softly, but only if you promise to fight for us. Ethan laughed gently, that same laugh that once made her believe in magic. I'll fight, he said, until the waves stop moving. The next morning, as dawn painted the sky orange, Amara's phone buzzed. It was Tund. Her hands trembled before answering. Amara, are you okay? He asked, his tone heavy with worry. There was a long pause before he continued. I saw the note you left. You don't have to explain. Just come home when you're ready. She could hear the pain in his voice, the love that still lingered despite everything. And in that moment, she realized no matter what choice she made, someone's heart would break. Amara turned to look at Ethan, who was sitting quietly by the shore, staring at the rising sun. The light painted his face gold, making him look like a man caught between this world and the next. Her heart pulled in two directions, one toward the man who had stayed, and another toward the man who had returned too late. Love wasn't supposed to feel like a decision, yet here she was torn between past and present, duty and desire, life and loss. As she walked toward Ethan, her footsteps slow, the sound of the waves whispered a question only her heart could answer. Which love do you save when both are real? The calm of morning didn't last. Dark clouds began to gather above the ocean, rumbling softly like the sky itself was warning them. Ethan stood, brushing the sand from his jeans, his face pale but peaceful. I should go, he said quietly. The hospital's been calling. They want me back for more tests. Amara rose too, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell him not to go, that love could rewrite every diagnosis, that fate could be changed if you believed hard enough. But deep down, she knew this was a battle no love could win. Let me come with you, she whispered. They were just 10 minutes from the city when it happened. A blinding flash of lightning struck a tree ahead, and Ethan swerved sharply to avoid it. The tires screeched, the car spun, everything blurred. Amara screamed his name as the vehicle skidded off the road and came to a violent stop against a guardrail. Silence followed, then smoke, rain, and the faint sound of Ethan gasping for air. Amara's hands shook as she reached for him. Ethan, Ethan, stay with me, she cried. His eyes fluttered open weakly, Amara, you're safe. That's all that matters. The sound of sirens faintly echoed in the distance, growing closer. Amara held Ethan's face in her hands, her tears mixing with the rain. You're going to be okay, she whispered over and over, as if the words could keep him alive. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. Remember the ocean, he said. Amara nodded, sobbing. I remember. He smiled faintly. Then, remember me. Her heart shattered as his hand fell slowly from hers. Ethan, please, she begged, shaking him. Stay with me, please. When the ambulance finally arrived, everything moved in slow motion. Voices shouted, lights flashed, and strangers pulled her away from him. But Amara couldn't hear any of it. All she saw was Ethan pale, still, and surrounded by people fighting to bring him back. She screamed his name, but the wind swallowed her voice. And in that moment, under the cold rain, she realized something terrifying. Love doesn't always end when the heart stops beating. Sometimes it lives on in the silence that follows. The sound of distant beeping was the first thing Amara heard when her eyes fluttered open. She was lying in a hospital bed, her arm wrapped in bandages, her head aching. For a moment, her mind was blank until the memories hit like a wave. The rain, the car, Ethan. She sat up suddenly, panic filling her chest. Ethan, she shouted, her voice cracking. Where's Ethan? A nurse rushed in, gently pressing her shoulders down. Please, ma'am, calm down. You were in an accident. You need to rest. But Amara's trembling voice broke through her exhaustion. Where is he? Tell me he's alive. The nurse hesitated, her eyes soft with sympathy. He was brought in with you, she said quietly. The doctors did everything they could. Amara froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as the words sank in. No, she whispered. No, please. Tears streamed down her face. The nurse squeezed her hand gently. I'm sorry. The room blurred as Amara broke into silent sobs, her world collapsing in on itself. Ethan, the man who loved her across distance, time, and pain, was gone. Hours later, as she sat in silence, a doctor entered with a small envelope. He asked us to give this to you in case, the doctor said softly before walking out. Amara's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, written in Ethan's handwriting, shaky, but still his. Amara, if you're reading this, I guess I ran out of time. But don't let this be the end of our story. I left something for you, something I never got to finish. Ask the nurse about the file under my name. And remember what I told you by the ocean, love doesn't die. It only changes form. Forever yours, Ethan. Her tears fell onto the page, blurring his name. Amara rushed to the nurse's desk, her voice shaking. There's a file under Ethan Hale, she said. The nurse searched for a moment, then handed her a brown envelope. Inside were medical records and one more letter, stamped with a hospital seal. Amara opened it carefully. Her eyes widened as she read the words. It wasn't just Ethan's file, it was a donor agreement. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the final line. Donor wishes that in the event of his passing, his heart be given to Amara Okoye. The paper slipped from her hands as she gasped in disbelief. Her chest tightened, not from pain, but from realization. Ethan hadn't just loved her until his last breath. He had given her the one thing he had left, his heart. Literally. Her trembling fingers moved to her chest, where she now felt the faint beat of something foreign yet familiar. Tears poured freely as she whispered, "You stayed, even when you couldn't." Outside the hospital window, the rain had stopped. The world was quiet again, but inside her, his heartbeat echoed, steady and alive. The days after Ethan's death blurred into one long silence. Amara barely spoke, barely ate. The hospital discharged her, but she refused to leave the city. Every heartbeat she felt seemed louder now, not just a rhythm, but a whisper. Sometimes at night, when the world went quiet, she swore she could hear his voice in the stillness. Breathe, Amara, live. At first, she thought it was grief playing tricks on her mind. But as the nights went on, it grew stronger, like his heart was trying to tell her something he hadn't finished saying. One evening, she walked back to the beach, the same place where they had last watched the sun fall beneath the waves. The wind was gentle, the sky a soft orange. As she stood by the water, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Ethan, are you still here?" A gust of wind brushed past her cheek, warm and steady. Then, faintly, she heard it again, his voice, deep and distant. "Don't let my love end with sadness." Her eyes filled with tears, she looked toward the horizon and whispered back, "Then show me what to do." The next morning, she opened Ethan's second letter, the one the nurse had found tucked behind the medical file. Inside was a handwritten note and a folded document titled, "The Hale Foundation." "Amara," the letter read, "if I couldn't stay, I wanted something that would. This foundation is for children in Lagos, for the same kids we met at the beach that first day. Help me build it. Let my heartbeat mean something." She pressed the paper to her chest, realizing what he'd left her wasn't just his heart, it was purpose. A reason to live again. Weeks turned into months, and Amara threw herself into the project. She used her savings, sold her car, and partnered with Ethan's company in London to establish the Hale Foundation for Hope. Children who once wandered the streets now had food, books, and laughter again. And every time she heard their laughter echo through the halls, she felt him, not as a ghost, but as warmth within her chest. Sometimes, when she signed her name on new documents, her heartbeat would quicken as if Ethan was saying, "I'm proud of you." One night, under the same sky that had once witnessed their love, Amara sat by the ocean, watching the waves dance beneath the moonlight. She whispered softly, "I thought losing you would end me, but maybe love isn't meant to end at all." Her hand rested on her chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. Each beat was a memory, every pulse, a whisper of the man who gave her not just his love, but his life. And though Ethan was gone, his heart continued to beat, not just within her, but in every child who smiled because of what they built together. She looked up at the stars and smiled. "We did it, Ethan." It was a quiet Thursday morning when the letter arrived. Amara had just finished reviewing school plans for the foundation when a courier handed her an envelope stamped with a London return address. Her heart skipped. The handwriting looked hauntingly familiar, looping, graceful strokes that she had traced 1,000 times in Ethan's notes. But it couldn't be him. He was gone. Still, her hands trembled as she opened it, the paper smelling faintly of cedar, just like Ethan's old journals. The first line read, "If you're reading this, it means I've kept my promise." Her breath caught in her throat. The letter continued, "Before my surgery, I made arrangements with my lawyer, Mr. Clark. I asked him to send this to you only when the Hale Foundation reached its first milestone. I wanted to make sure you didn't just survive, Amara, but lived." Tears blurred her vision as she read. "Inside this envelope, you'll find the deed to something that belongs to both of us, a small house by the sea in Cape Town. Go there, you'll understand why I chose it." Her hands shook harder. A house by the sea? Ethan had never mentioned Cape Town. What could possibly be waiting there? 2 weeks later, she found herself standing before a small cottage nestled near the cliffs of Cape Town. The air smelled of salt and roses. Waves crashed gently below, whispering the same rhythm that had haunted her since Ethan's death. Inside the cottage, everything was just as he described, simple, warm, full of books and photographs. But what caught her attention was a single painting hanging above the fireplace. It was of her sitting by the beach, sunlight on her skin, smiling. He had painted it. Her knees weakened as she whispered, "Ethan, you planned this?" As she explored, she noticed a small box beside the painting, carved with Ethan's initials. Inside was a flash drive and a note that said, "Play this when the sea feels calm." Her hands trembled as she inserted it into her laptop. The screen lit up, and suddenly, Ethan's face appeared alive, smiling, eyes glistening. "Hey, love," he said softly. "If you're watching this, I'm not there, at least. Not the way I used to be. But I wanted to leave you something more than words." Amara covered her mouth, tears streaming freely. His voice, his smile, it was as if time had folded back. "I bought this house because it reminded me of you, strong, peaceful, close to the ocean that connects every place we loved. I knew you'd turn my dream into something real, and you did. You gave those kids a future, Amara, but now it's time for your future. Don't live in my shadow. Don't drown in what we lost. Let love find you again. He paused, smiled faintly, then added, and when it does, tell him about me. Tell him how lucky I was to love you. The screen went dark, but Amara sat frozen for a long time. The ocean roared outside, echoing through the open window like a heartbeat. She stood slowly and walked toward the water, her feet sinking into the cool sand. The waves touched her toes, and the wind carried a soft whisper, the same phrase she had heard in Lagos. Breathe, Amara, live. She closed her eyes and whispered back, I will. And for the first time since his death, she smiled not out of memory, but out of hope. The next morning, Amara woke to the sound of footsteps outside the cottage. At first, she thought it was the wind stirring the sand, until she heard a gentle knock on the door. She hesitated, her heart quickening. Hardly anyone knew she was there. When she opened the door, a tall man stood before her, dressed in a light linen shirt, his hair tousled by the ocean breeze. He had an envelope in his hand and a calm, knowing expression. Miss Amara, he said softly, I'm sorry to come unannounced. My name is Daniel Clark, Ethan's lawyer and his friend. Amara invited him in, still uncertain but curious. Daniel's eyes scanned the room briefly, stopping on Ethan's painting of her. He smiled faintly. He spoke of this place often, Daniel said. He wanted it to feel like home for you. Amara's throat tightened. You knew about all this? The letters, the foundation, everything? Daniel nodded. Yes, but there's something Ethan didn't want in the letter, something he wanted me to tell you personally. Her heart skipped. What is it? He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a small, weathered notebook. He asked me to give you this only when you were ready to truly let go. The notebook's cover was soft and worn, its edges frayed from time. On the front, in faded ink, were the words, For my tomorrow. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were sketches, poems, and letters Ethan had written during his final days in the hospital, things he'd never sent. Some pages were full of dreams for their foundation. Others, confessions he had never spoken aloud. And on one page, in bold handwriting, he had written, If love is real, it doesn't end, it transforms. Her tears fell freely, blotting the ink as she whispered, You never stopped believing in us. As Amara flipped through the pages, Daniel cleared his throat softly. There's more, he said. Ethan, he wasn't just building a foundation for children. He was building one for you. Amara looked up, confused. Daniel continued, Before he died, he set up a trust, one that would support your education, your travels, your dreams. He said you always talked about teaching young African girls to dream beyond borders. Her lips trembled. He remembered that? Daniel smiled gently. He remembered everything. As they talked, the air grew warm with the scent of sea salt and jasmine. There was something peaceful about Daniel, not romantic, but familiar, like a bridge between past and future. He told her stories of Ethan's last weeks, how he'd spoken about her every single day, how his final words weren't about death, but life. Do you know what he said before the surgery? Daniel asked quietly. Amara shook her head. Tell her she was the reason I lived longer than I was supposed to. The words struck deep, and for a long moment, silence filled the room, heavy with love that refused to die. As Daniel prepared to leave, he paused at the door. He wanted you to know that someday, when the time was right, you'd meet someone who would remind you that love isn't about replacing, it's about continuing. Amara looked at him thoughtfully, her eyes reflecting the ocean light. Do you believe that? She asked. Daniel smiled. I do, because I think he already knew who that person might be. Her heart fluttered, a mix of fear, curiosity, and something new she hadn't felt in months. As Daniel walked down the sandy path, the waves crashed gently behind him, and for the first time, Amara didn't feel alone. That night, long after Daniel had gone, Amara couldn't sleep. The waves outside whispered softly, but her thoughts were louder. She kept replaying his words. He already knew who that person might be. Was it just kindness, or had Ethan really foreseen something more? As she paced the room, her eyes landed on Ethan's desk, the one sitting untouched in the corner. It was old, carved with initials and small sketches, the same kind Ethan used to draw on napkins. When she opened the top drawer, it was empty, but as she ran her fingers along the bottom panel, she felt something a loose board. Her heart skipped. She pried it open and found a sealed envelope hidden beneath. Her hands shook as she slid the envelope out. It was aged, yellowed at the corners, with her name written in Ethan's familiar scrawl, "For Amara only when the sea feels quiet." Her chest tightened. She sat by the window where moonlight poured in and carefully opened it. The first line hit her like a wave. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it back." Tears immediately filled her eyes. She took a deep breath and kept reading. "I wanted to tell you something I never could because loving you was both my greatest joy and my greatest fear. When I first met you in Lagos," Ethan wrote, "I was already sick. The doctors had told me I had months, maybe less. But then you smiled at me that day by the water, and for the first time, I felt alive again. You gave me hope, a reason to fight when I'd already given up. Every heartbeat I had after that belonged to you. I didn't want to tell you the truth then, because I wanted you to love me for life, not for pity." Amara's tears fell freely now, every word cut deep, yet it warmed her heart all the same. "The day I left for London, I already knew my chances were small, but I wasn't afraid of dying anymore, only afraid that you'd stop living if I did. So I planned everything, the foundation, the house, the recordings, to make sure my love didn't end with me. You were the miracle I wasn't supposed to have, Amara. Promise me you'll never bury your heart with mine." She pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing quietly. His words felt alive, as if he were there, holding her again. The next morning, as dawn painted the sky gold, Amara stood at the edge of the water. Something inside her had changed. The ache was still there, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt alive, like love reborn, not lost. She looked down at the letter one last time and smiled. Then, gently, she placed it in a glass bottle and tossed it into the sea. The waves carried it away toward the horizon, toward Ethan, toward everything that had begun with a single heartbeat. Far out on the open sea, the glass bottle floated gently over the waves, its path uncertain but purposeful. Days passed, then weeks. It traveled through storms and calm tides, crossing borders unseen. Inside it, Ethan's final letter remained dry, protected, waiting. One morning, miles away along the coast of Ghana, a fisherman named Kweku spotted something glinting in the sunlight. Curious, he pulled it from the water and turned it over in his hands. It was just an old bottle, sealed tight, with a rolled-up paper inside. Little did he know, it carried the story of two souls, one gone, and one still healing. Kweku took the bottle home, thinking it was just another piece of ocean debris. But that night, as he sat outside his hut by the shore, something made him open it. The paper inside was written in careful handwriting English, with words that seemed almost alive. "If you find this, know that love doesn't end when people do. It drifts, it travels, it finds new shores." He read it aloud, his voice trembling slightly. "Whoever wrote this," he whispered, "their love was real." The next morning, he decided to post a picture of the letter online, writing, "Found this message from the sea. Does anyone know who Amara or Ethan are?" Within hours, the post spread across social media. People around the world began sharing it, from London to Lagos, New York to Nairobi. The hashtag message from Ethan trended for days. News outlets picked it up, calling it the love letter that traveled across oceans. Amara had no idea her private goodbye had become a global story. Until one morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her friend from Lagos called her, voice full of shock. "Amara, have you seen the news? Ethan's letter. The world has found it." A week later, Amara received an unexpected email. It was from a major global news network. They wanted to interview her for a documentary titled Letters of the Sea, True Stories of Love That Endure. At first, she hesitated. The story was so personal, so sacred. But then she remembered Ethan's words, "Don't let my love end with sadness." So she replied simply, "Yes, I'll tell our story." Months later, when the documentary aired, millions watched as Amara told their story, the laughter, the pain, the promise. People cried across continents. Some said it restored their faith in love. Others said it reminded them of someone they'd lost. And when the film ended, It closed on Ethan's final line from the letter. If love is real, it doesn't end, it transforms. The world fell silent, the kind of silence only true love can leave behind. Amara stared at the message for nearly an hour before replying. Her fingers trembled as she typed, "Yes, call me tomorrow." When her phone rang the next day, she almost didn't answer, but curiosity and something deeper made her swipe accept. "Hello," she said softly. A warm, steady voice replied. "Amara, I've been waiting to speak to you." Something in his tone felt familiar, calm, patient, reassuring. He continued, "Ethan wanted you to have closure, but he also wanted you to have beginning." A week later, Amara flew to London to meet Adrian. They met in a quiet cafe near Hyde Park, the same one Ethan once took her 2 years ago. When she saw Adrian, she froze for a moment, not because he looked like Ethan, but because he felt like him. The same kindness in his eyes, the same easy smile. "I've seen that look before." Adrian chuckled softly. "He used to say you always stared like you were reading his thoughts." Amara smiled faintly. "And you sound like him." He shrugged gently. "He taught me more about love than anyone ever has." Over coffee, Adrian pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "He gave me this 2 months before he passed," he said. Amara's breath caught as he slid it across the table. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the words, "For every heartbeat that follows mine." Tears filled her eyes. He said, Adrian continued softly, "that if you ever stopped looking for him in the past, you'd find him again in people, in kindness, in love." Amara touched the bracelet, whispering, "He really thought of everything." The two spent hours talking about Ethan, about the foundation, about life. Amara found herself laughing again, the kind of laughter she hadn't felt in years. When they walked out of the cafe, London was glowing under soft rain. Adrian offered her his umbrella, their hands brushing lightly. A spark ran through her, subtle, unexpected, but real. For a moment, she almost felt guilty, until she remembered Ethan's words. "Don't live in my shadow. Let love find you again." And for the first time, she realized maybe love had just found her. As Amara stood by the Thames that evening, watching the river flow beneath the city lights, she thought of Ethan not with pain, but with peace. She could almost hear his voice in the wind again, whispering, "You did it, Amara. You lived." Adrian walked up beside her and smiled. "He'd be proud of you," he said quietly. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "He already is." The two stood in silence, the water shimmering before them, a symbol of all that had passed and all that was yet to come. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of the night, two hearts began to beat in harmony again. Amara couldn't sleep that night. London's gentle rain tapped against her hotel window like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. The bracelet gleamed softly on her wrist, Ethan's final gift, his silent message from beyond. She closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm of memories flooding back. But as she drifted into half-sleep, a faint sound startled her, a voice, distant yet familiar, whispering her name. "Amara." Her eyes flew open. The room was empty, yet she felt him, the same energy, the same warmth that once wrapped around her heart. The next morning, Amara decided to visit Ethan's old apartment. It had been untouched since his death, preserved like a shrine by his assistant. The scent of his cologne still lingered in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of old books and dried roses. As she wandered around, she noticed a dusty sketchbook on his desk. Inside, between sketches of sunsets and ocean waves, was a folded envelope, her name written in Ethan's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter that began, "If you're reading this, it means I've kept my promise even in absence. I found my way back to you." She read on, tears blurring her vision. "Amara, there's something I never told you. When we met, I wasn't who you thought I was. The truth would have scared you away. But I want you to know now everything I did, every moment we shared, was real. You saved me." The words struck her like thunder. She clutched the letter tighter, her mind spinning. "What truth?" she whispered to the empty room. Her eyes scanned the bottom of the page. There, beneath his signature, was a small note written in faded ink. "Ask Adrian. He knows." Amara's heart pounded as she called Adrian. He answered almost immediately, his voice calm but cautious. Adrian, Ethan left me a letter, she said, trying to steady her voice. He said you know something. There was silence on the other end, long, heavy silence. Finally, Adrian sighed. I was hoping this day wouldn't come so soon. Then it's true, she asked. Yes, he said softly, but you deserve the whole story. Meet me tomorrow at Steady George's Pier, by the water. I'll tell you everything. That night, London's skies darkened with thunder. Amara stood by the window again, staring out at the restless waves of the Thames. For the first time, she felt fear not of losing Ethan, but of discovering who he really was. Why would he hide something from her? What could be so big that even in death, it lingered between them? As lightning flashed across the sky, she whispered to herself, no matter what I find tomorrow, I'll face it. For him, the bracelet on her wrist seemed to hum faintly, like a pulse, as though Ethan's heart was still with her, guiding her toward the truth. The morning air was cold and heavy with fog when Amara arrived at Steady George's Pier. The sound of seagulls echoed in the distance, and the Thames shimmered faintly under the pale light. She spotted Adrian standing near the railing, his coat flapping slightly in the wind. He turned as she approached, his expression both somber and cautious. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I didn't have a choice, she replied. I need to know what Ethan meant. Adrian sighed, glancing at the river before meeting her eyes. What I'm about to tell you, he said, may change everything you thought you knew about him. Adrian pulled a small, weathered file from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Inside were photographs, medical reports, and newspaper clippings. She frowned, scanning the pages. They weren't about Ethan. They were about Nathaniel Hale, founder of a humanitarian organization that had vanished mysteriously years ago. Her voice trembled as she asked, who is this man? Adrian's reply came slowly. That was Ethan, before he disappeared. Amara froze. What do you mean before? Adrian nodded gravely. Ethan Hale wasn't just a businessman. He was part of a classified organ donor program, one that failed. Except for him. Her breath caught in her throat. Organ donor program? Adrian nodded. The project was called the Heart Initiative. Ethan was the only subject who survived a full heart transfer using biosynthetic technology. He'd received a donor heart from a young African woman who died in a Lagos hospital. After the surgery, he vanished from the public eye, trying to live quietly. Amara took a step back, her mind spinning. Wait, Lagos? Adrian's eyes softened. Yes, the same city where he met you. He told me he felt drawn to Nigeria, but he didn't understand why until he met you. Her hands trembled. You mean? Adrian nodded slowly. Ethan's heart, it once belonged to someone from your homeland. Amara felt the world tilt around her. Memories of Ethan's words flooded her mind. I feel like I've known you forever. Your heartbeat feels like mine. Tears filled her eyes. All this time, the connection we had, it wasn't just love. It was fate. Adrian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He never told you because he didn't want his past to overshadow your future. But before he died, he said something I'll never forget. Tell her that every beat of my heart was hers. Long before we met, Amara covered her face, sobbing softly as the river breeze brushed against her skin, almost as if Ethan himself was there, comforting her. When she finally looked up, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the sun's reflection dancing across the water. She whispered, so it was never just coincidence. Adrian shook his head. No, it was destiny, a love written in blood and heartbeat. Amara closed her eyes, letting the wind carry her tears. I thought I'd lost him, she murmured. But maybe he never left at all. The bracelet on her wrist glowed faintly once more, pulsing in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat, as though the heart inside her chest remembered every moment, every word, every touch they had shared. Somewhere beyond the waves, love had found a way to live on. The plane touched down in Lagos under a sky painted with orange and gold. As Amara stepped out, a familiar warmth embraced her, the scent of the ocean breeze, the chatter of the city, the rhythm of life she had once tried to leave behind. But this time, she wasn't coming home as a journalist or a broken woman. She was coming as a seeker chasing the echo of a love that refused to die. Ethan's letter had led her here. And now the final clue, the donor's file, pointed to a small village in Ogun State. Somewhere there, A story waited to be told, the story of the heart that had once beaten inside the man she loved. The journey took hours. The dusty road wound through endless stretches of green fields and palm trees swaying gently in the wind. When she arrived, the village seemed frozen in time, quiet, peaceful, untouched by the noise of the modern world. Children ran barefoot along narrow paths, and elders sat under mango trees, speaking in low, rhythmic tones. A local nurse named Tai Tai greeted her kindly and led her to a small memorial at the edge of the village. "This is where she was buried," Tai Tai said softly, "the young woman who gave her heart." Amara's knees weakened as she knelt by the simple wooden cross, her hand trembling as she brushed off the dust that covered the name. The letters carved into the wood read, Chinelo Adebayo 1997 to 2020, a heart that gave life. Amara stared at the name, her breath catching in her throat. Chinelo, she remembered that name. She'd once seen it in Ethan's notes, written in the corner of a journal page. Tai-Tai placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She was a teacher, she explained. She loved helping children learn to read. She died in an accident, but her heart was donated through a special international program. Amara's tears fell silently. She whispered to the wooden cross, "Your heart found love, Chinelo. It found me." As the sun dipped behind the hills, Amara sat beneath a large mango tree near the memorial. The air was calm, but a sudden rustle of leaves made her look up. For a moment, she thought she saw a faint silhouette, a woman in a white dress standing near the cross, smiling softly. Amara blinked, and the figure was gone, but a gentle voice lingered in the air. "Take care of the love that my heart carried." Amara's eyes filled with awe and tears. She whispered, "I will." In that moment, she realized love wasn't something you lose. It transforms, travels, and finds new vessels. Days later, Amara renamed Ethan's charity the Heart of Two Worlds Foundation. Its mission expanded not just for children, but for organ donation awareness across Africa and beyond. Every year on the anniversary of Ethan's passing, she visited the village, placing flowers beneath Chinelo's cross and whispering a silent prayer. The world knew it as philanthropy, but to Amara, it was something far deeper. It was the continuation of a love story written not in words, but in heartbeats. And somewhere, in the rhythm of the wind, she could still hear Ethan's voice, gentle, eternal, and full of warmth. "You kept your promise." One evening, as she packed her things to leave the village, Tai-Tai approached her with a small parcel. "It came from London," she said. "No return address, but it has your name." Amara opened it, her breath catching as she saw Ethan's handwriting once again. "My love, if you've found Chinelo, then you've found the rest of me. I always believed that hearts find their way home. Maybe that's why mine led me to you. Wherever you go next, remember this. Love never ends, it only changes form." She pressed the letter to her heart, whispering through tears, "Then our love will never die." A year later, the foundation's first anniversary was held in the same Lagos beach where Amara and Ethan had first met. Hundreds gathered under the stars, holding lanterns that floated like fireflies over the waves. Children laughed, the ocean shimmered, and for the first time in a long while, Amara felt peace. As she stood at the edge of the shore, holding her lantern, she whispered softly, "This is for you, Ethan, and for you, Chinelo." She released the lantern into the sky, watching it rise higher and higher until it disappeared among the stars. Then, suddenly, her bracelet began to glow brighter than it ever had before. A warm wind swept through the beach, wrapping around her like an invisible embrace. People around her turned in wonder as the lanterns in the sky seemed to move together, forming a glowing shape, faint but unmistakable. It was a heart. Amara's breath caught, her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Ethan?" And then she heard it, two voices, intertwined like melody and harmony, carried by the wind. "Thank you for finishing our story." The bracelet pulsed gently in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she knew it wasn't just her imagination. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She felt surrounded by love, by spirit, by eternity. When morning came, the beach was empty except for the soft trail of footprints in the sandhurst, and another pair that vanished at the water's edge. She smiled through her tears, Realizing some love stories don't end in goodbye, they end in transformation. Amara returned to the city with a calm heart. The foundation grew beyond borders, touching lives across continents, children in Africa, hospitals in Europe, hearts healed in both body and spirit. And every time she spoke at an event, she ended with the same words. Love isn't bound by time or distance. It's the rhythm that connects souls across worlds. Years later, an old Amara sat on her porch, watching the sunset. In her hand was the same bracelet, still faintly glowing. Still warm, a young girl ran up to her, laughing, holding a flower. "Grandma, who gave you that bracelet?" Amara smiled softly. "Two people who taught me what forever means." The girl tilted her head curiously. "Will I meet them someday?" Amara looked toward the horizon, where the sky met the sea, and whispered, "Oh, my dear, they're already here." And as the last ray of sunlight touched her face, the bracelet pulsed one final time to heartbeats in perfect rhythm.